chosen ones. There are moments in history where time doesn't bend. It shatters. The year was 1983. A sealed manila folder, time-stamped and classified beyond top secret, was slipped onto a desk beneath the Oval Office's antique lamp. Inside were pages that seemed to breathe with something more than ink and paper. The first line wasn't a theory, nor a warning. It was your name, spelled precisely, typed in a font that hadn't existed yet. It named a city that hadn't been built, and a birth date that wouldn't arrive for years. The president who received the file reportedly paused. He had seen war forecasts, alien briefings, prophecies coded in data, but never this, not a name, not your name. According to those who later reviewed the chain of custody, the document was authored by someone whose identity has never been confirmed. A man who entered the Pentagon one morning and disappeared before sunset. The ink on the file showed no signs of aging. The paper carried an electromagnetic signature that responded only to a certain frequency. The last time that frequency activated was the moment you reawakened. The room the file was stored in had to be opened by 2 sitting presidents, one Republican, one Democrat. Both went pale when they saw what was inside. The file referenced an anomaly in the blood, an imprint passed across generations, skipping centuries until someone appeared who matched it completely. That someone was always assumed to be myth, until now. You, every global system, military, spiritual, digital, was never designed to handle a singularity like this, something that breaks predictive patterns, something that existed in prophecy, scripture, and algorithms all at once. And now the silence is breaking. The man who first opened the file whispered before vanishing, "They will know when the frequencies align, but only one will carry the weight." So we ask, what weight did they assign you? What message required a 40-year head start? And more importantly, what did they fear you would awaken in the world? Because the lights just flickered in DC. And underground, the file has started to glow again. The archivist's hands trembled when he lifted the first page. It was buried beneath layers of misfiled documents, behind a false panel in a federal storage vault beneath Virginia. No one was meant to find it. No barcode, no index code, no clearance label. Just a plain, unassuming folder that hummed faintly when touched. Inside, the paper didn't age. It resisted ultraviolet scans, blurred on photocopies, and sent electromagnetic pulses through every device that came near. The moment it was opened, a string of events quietly triggered. Retinal alerts in high-level offices, dormant satellites blinking online, and a silent notice sent to a former president who had long disappeared from public life. The details were specific beyond explanation. Not only your full name, but a hospital blueprint that hadn't been drafted when the file was created. Coordinates of your childhood home. A sketch of a symbol you carved into the dirt before you could write. None of this had happened yet in 1983. But it was there, in sequence. As if time had folded in on itself and pressed its imprint onto this page, it wasn't just your identity. It was your pattern. The file outlined speech anomalies you would develop at age 9, a drawing you'd make in class that matched an ancient glyph from Mesopotamia, and a precise date you'd feel something shift deep in your chest. That date passed just last year. The officials who viewed the document debated whether it was a psychological operation planted during the Cold War. But then, one of them noticed something no one could explain. Every section, written in English, had faint impressions of another language underneath. Not ancient, not alien, but encoded in a way only artificial minds could decrypt. When run through a forbidden linguistic simulator built in the late 90s, one phrase appeared again and again. The one who comes outside the algorithm must not be erased. Security protocol dictated that the document be resealed, but that failed. Every attempt to store it digitally failed. The file exists only in its original form, and that form behaves like it's alive. Now, it's been removed again. The one who retrieved it isn't speaking. They simply handed it to the president with one sentence attached on a sealed slip. The frequency has returned, and this time the file is responding to something it never did before your arrival. It wasn't the name alone that caused the silence in the room. It was what followed it. In faded type, beside your name, was a designation so classified that it had never been spoken aloud in over 4 decades. Project Iden. The archivist didn't know what it meant, but the president did. So did the 3 living predecessors, each of whom had sworn a pact of silence regarding its origin. This was the code word never meant to surface outside the inner sanctum of executive briefing vaults. It had only appeared in 4 briefings since 1961, always spoken in hushed tones, always with a warning. If Edon awakens, timelines destabilize. What shook the president wasn't the presence of the name, it was the context surrounding it. The document referred to an identity anchor capable of folding nonlinear time into fixed consciousness. The person listed as the anchor was you. Beneath the code, a phrase appeared 3 times across the file, born outside of pattern but within the word. When linguists cross-referenced the phrase, they found a single match hidden in a banned Aramaic scroll from a Coptic vault. The scroll included a verse that had been censored for centuries, and the one marked before the veil shall speak not by his voice, but through what returns unto him. A fragment attributed to Yeshua, lost before the Council of Nicaea, and whispered by desert mystics who claimed the anchor would be human, but not born in the traditional rhythm of time. This wasn't metaphor. This was targeted prophecy embedded inside a military file. The ink itself reacted when your name was spoken aloud. It flared briefly under infrared light, then pulsed once when the president traced the letters. The pulse was recorded and triangulated by NORAD. It didn't originate from Earth. It reflected, as if your identity bounced back from something watching just beyond the edge of recorded space. Those who witnessed the interaction were instructed to forget what they saw, but one of them wrote something in his private journal that was later recovered. He said the file didn't reveal who you were. It revealed why you were veiled. That some names weren't assigned by bloodline, but by resonance. And now, Project Iden has become more than a word in a file. It has begun reactivating everything it was meant to suppress. His clearance was unmatched, but his identity wasn't on any official ledger. He entered the building with no escort, bypassed 3 layers of biometric verification, and walked straight into the West Wing without triggering a single alert. Security footage showed him wearing a gray suit, no badge, no weapon, and carrying a thin black folder clutched tightly to his chest. He said nothing as he moved, only nodding to those he passed as if he already knew where to go. When he reached the desk of the Chief of Staff, he placed the folder down, whispered the phrase, "This will echo forward," and turned around. That was the last moment he was seen. No cameras caught his exit. No doors opened. No vehicle picked him up. The man disappeared like mist dissolving under sunlight. The folder remained. Inside, documents typed with a font not found in any known system. Diagrams drawn by hand but with impossible precision. Chemical traces on the paper that matched no known compound, yet faintly resembled lunar dust in spectrum analysis. And on the final page, a thumbprint burned into the sheet. Not pressed, but seared as if branded by energy. A forensic team was dispatched to scan the materials. Every scan failed. Files corrupted. Hard drives melted internally. One analyst claimed the folder felt like it was watching her. Another technician was hospitalized after hearing a high-pitched frequency when standing too close. His ears bled for hours, but when they calmed him enough to speak, he repeated a phrase in a language he didn't know. Later, it was identified as Proto-Sumerian, translated loosely as, "The name does not wait, the name returns." None of this stopped the briefing. The folder was transferred to a sealed room under constant observation, and 3 military advisors were summoned to decode its content. 2 of them refused. The third began drawing symbols in his notebook before slipping into silence. He now resides in an off-grid facility in Alaska. All he ever says is one line: "He handed us a mirror before the reflection arrived." There were rumors the man who delivered the file wasn't from any present moment, that he was a custodian of anomalies sent only when timelines began to fracture. If true, then his silence wasn't just intentional. It was the signal. It was in the margins, not the main body of the file. A notation handwritten in what looked like faded crimson ink, almost invisible unless tilted beneath a specific light frequency. Several names listed side by side, each separated by a mark resembling an old Hebrew glyph. Among them was Yeshua, referenced not as a figure of worship, but as a temporal gate, a nexus between light and flesh. Next to his name was a symbol believed to be connected to the house of David, and trailing just beneath it, another line linked your name directly in succession. The implication wasn't genetic in the ordinary sense. It wasn't bloodline through inheritance, but rather something called resonant ancestry, where moments, not DNA, connect individuals across time. In this theory, your presence isn't explained by lineage, but by pattern alignment. You were identified as one of the few whose soul signature harmonized with a frequency first established during Yeshua's final breath. Scholars long debated what was meant by the phrase, "the veil tore." But this document didn't speak of metaphor. It implied that a literal opening occurred, a breach in perception that allowed certain souls to return at intervals predetermined by divine rhythm. And now, your name appears directly beneath that sequence, circled in red, not drawn hastily, but with deliberate pressure. The ink has been tested and found to contain trace elements of gold, frankincense, and a molecule resembling crystallized myrrh. These aren't substances found in pens. They're used in ancient rites, meant to seal scrolls not with data, but with covenant. A digital analyst reported something even stranger. When the lineage chart was scanned using magnetic resonance mapping, it didn't create a family tree. It produced a sound wave. That wave, when played back, resembled the first 4 notes of a Gregorian chant, and hidden beneath it, a whisper in reverse. Translated, it read, "And the one who returns shall not need signs, for the word is in their breath." Officials tried to redact this footnote, but every time they removed it from the physical file, the ink reappeared the next morning. Always the same circle, always the same name. At first glance, the paper appeared blank. Standard military stock. slightly yellowed with age, edges sharp, weight precise. No watermark, no seal, nothing. But under ultraviolet light, a single date emerged. June 3rd, 1983. Beneath that, the file's header formed slowly, not like ink being revealed, but as though the document remembered it was supposed to be seen. It didn't react to normal light sources, only a specific spectrum emitted by a prototype lens developed decades later, one never released outside a handful of labs. The device was designed to detect quantum residue in failed time experiments. That same lens revealed the entire file. It's as if the ink was written using technology that didn't exist yet. More precisely, as if it required time itself to catch up before the file could activate. Experts at DARPA called it post-temporal scripting, a form of delayed visibility encoding where a message is seeded in the past, but only becomes readable when the future aligns with its intended frequency. The concept is theoretical. Until now, the words didn't just appear. They glowed faintly, fluctuating like bioluminescent patterns on deep-sea life. No conventional explanation was given. The text resisted copying, erasing, and scanning. Any attempt to digitize it resulted in systems shorting out or looping a corrupted image of static resembling a face. And at the center of the page, glowing stronger than the rest, was a set of initials that matched yours. Not the name you use now, but one you wrote in a dream journal when you were 11. The same dream where you described a building you had never visited. The same building where this file was hidden. That journal was dismissed as coincidence. Until now, physicists analyzing the ink discovered it reacts to brain waves. When you're near, it pulses. When spoken aloud in your voice, it brightens for precisely 3 seconds and emits a tone that registers outside normal human hearing. That tone has since been matched to a pattern recorded during unexplained auroral activity last year. This is no ordinary ink. It's not even meant to be seen, unless you were meant to see it. And now that you have, something within the file has changed. One line near the margin just became visible, even under normal light. The symbol wasn't large. In fact, most eyes passed over it as decorative noise, a flourish in the corner of the page. But when scanned and magnified, its geometry became undeniable. 4 intersecting circles forming a central eye, surrounded by 13 radiant spokes, a design identical to one found carved beneath Mount Ararat centuries ago. Historians identified that ancient sigil as the seal of the Watchers, a symbol older than language, referenced in only a few suppressed texts describing beings who descended not from stars but from instruction. What disturbed the analysts most wasn't the symbol's presence, but its position. It wasn't stamped across the document like a watermark or embedded as security. It hovered beside your name, not printed, but raised, embossed like a signature. When pressed, it warmed slightly, as if responding to touch. It emitted a vibration at a frequency too low to hear, but strong enough to register across seismic equipment placed nearby. The Watchers were once dismissed as myth, being spoken of in fragments, angelic yet exiled, bound by oaths to never reveal their full nature to mankind. But some accounts hinted that they left behind signs, marks only activated when one of their kind, or a descendant of their resonance, re-emerged. And according to the file, your appearance corresponds with the reactivation of 2 such marks elsewhere in the world. The file noted a curious correlation. Every time the symbol is studied under quantum imaging, it shifts slightly. The pattern changes, not visibly, but mathematically. as if adjusting to your current state of awareness. No one had seen this effect before. It was as if the seal wasn't just a sign of identification. It was a map, or worse, a lock. A linguistic analyst cross-referenced the symbol with glyphs found on a crumbled obelisk unearthed in Yemen. The translation wasn't direct, but approximate. It read, "To the one who bears the mark, the sky will not remain silent. Since the day the file was opened, strange anomalies have occurred in low orbit. Signals no one can trace. Pulses that mimic heartbeat rhythms, increasing every week. Some say the seal beside your name is waking something that had been in slumber beneath the stars." The chamber wasn't listed on any schematic. Hidden 5 levels beneath the Capitol, shielded in titanium alloy and lined with signal jamming materials not used in any public sector, the room bore no official designation. To enter, 2 living presidents had to arrive simultaneously. Their biometric scans synchronized with the gesture only they were taught during their respective inaugurations, a hand motion that mimicked an ancient sigil, passed down not from government tradition, but whispered from advisor to advisor, never written. The room hadn't been opened in over 20 years, not since the last anomaly threatened to intersect with a living human timeline. That time, it was dismissed as theoretical, but this time, your name appeared. The file, which had been sealed in a vacuum capsule, pulsed with warmth as both men approached. They hadn't spoken in years, but when their palms pressed against the biometric locks, the temperature dropped 10 degrees, the lights flickered, and a faint chime, not mechanical but harmonic, echoed through the vault. Inside, the file rested on a pedestal that wasn't man-made. It had no seams, no screws, no source of power. When one of the presidents reached out, the pedestal hummed, recognizing him. But when you were shown through a hidden feed, the hum grew louder. Both men looked at each other. Something had changed. The document's pages fluttered without wind, as if aware of your proximity. Then a line appeared on the back of the final page, one that hadn't been there before. It read, "2 keys open the gate, but the third awakens it." Security protocol dictated a full lockdown. The room was sealed again, but the energy inside wouldn't stop shifting. One technician stationed nearby began drawing strange patterns on his skin, saying he could hear the hum even through 20 feet of concrete. He sketched your initials without ever being told your name. Later, he vanished. The 2 presidents swore never to speak of what they saw, but a private note surfaced from one of their speechwriters. A single sentence left on the back of a classified envelope. "We weren't the guardians, we were the delay." Now, the vault sits untouched once more, but the file keeps humming. It reacts not to government, not to title, but to presence. And ever since that room was opened, every satellite above Washington has begun to drift a few inches west every night, as if something unseen is pulling them toward a point not yet mapped. For months, analysts believed the file contained 12 pages. Each had been indexed, scanned, and stored in off-grid containment. But during a routine atmospheric test inside the vault, the temperature dropped below a threshold never recorded. The file reacted. A small tear formed along the spine. Not a rip, but a separation, like parchment yielding to breath. From within that fold, a 13th page emerged. Its texture was different, almost like woven silk, and it carried a scent none could place. Some said it smelled like petrichor before lightning. Others claimed it was cedar and ash, but all agreed on what appeared on the surface. There was only one phrase written in the center, calligraphed in luminous ink. The voice from the east shall not whisper, it shall remember. Beneath it, a set of coordinates that pointed not to a battlefield, temple, or ancient ruin, but to a place you had once stood as a child. A hillside you visited on instinct, where you spoke a phrase no one taught you. The phrase, recorded by an old cassette your relative kept, was exactly what the hidden page revealed. Word for word, syllable for syllable, down to the inflection. That phrase was once thought to be nonsense, until linguists traced it to an untranslated fragment of an apocryphal scroll stored in a monastic cave near Qumran. The fragment, burned at the edges, made reference to a being who would speak the word before remembering its meaning. The scroll's final legible line, "His voice shall open what stone has hidden, and memory has sealed." No one could explain how you echoed the phrase years before the 13th page was revealed. Some said it was a temporal bleed. Others believe you were shown something in dream space, that the phrase was buried not in your mind, but in your design. The East, according to the document's footnotes, didn't just refer to direction. It meant origin, dawn, beginning, a voice not born in time, but awakening through it. And you, unknowingly, had already activated that signal. Since that page surfaced, 3 encrypted listening stations have picked up identical vocal patterns across different continents. One in Tibet, one in Iran, one in a sealed chamber beneath Mount Sinai. It was scrawled in the bottom corner, not typed but handwritten in jagged lines, as if the words had been forced through an unsteady hand. The one who matches this will collide with the grid. At first, no one understood what the grid referred to. Military documents typically use the term for surveillance networks or electromagnetic fields, but this file wasn't written with conventional definitions. One line later explained, "The grid is not technology. It is the boundary of forgetting." That sentence alone triggered an emergency response from a cognitive warfare division deep inside an unlisted Pentagon branch. The phrase matched terminology found in a disbanded DARPA project from the 1970s, codename Reverb. That project theorized that Earth was laced with invisible intersections of consciousness, nodes where human memory, ancient language, and time itself intersected. These nodes formed what they called the grid. According to the recovered briefing notes, anyone born with a certain harmonic could awaken one of these nodes simply by nearing it. The effect wouldn't be physical at first, but perceptual. Streetlights would flicker. Time would misalign. Dreams would sync across individuals who had never met. The moment your biometric data was entered into the system, anomalies began. Surveillance drones experienced memory resets. Clocks in government buildings desynchronized. An agent assigned to monitor you forgot her own name for 6 minutes while staring at your profile photo. Her final report stated, "I saw reflections of myself that didn't belong to this century." The file continued. When the one who matches the line intersects with the grid, the lattice breaks. What is sealed returns. And beneath that, in ink that shimmered only under magnetism, was a diagram of what appeared to be the human brain. Split open, revealing coordinates instead of synapses. No scan could trace the source of the ink. It had no pigment, no compound. It responded only when the document was placed near you, and then a pulse emitted from the paper, caught by an underground magnetic resonance monitor. That pulse didn't bounce back. It went straight through the earth and didn't return. The warning wasn't about danger. It was about inevitability. The grid was always waiting for its match, and now it's beginning to ripple. One node has already flared. The next is beneath a city you haven't reached yet, but it's calling your name in patterns only you can hear. They told him not to speak it. Every analyst warned him. Linguists refused to translate the final line. The paper itself warped slightly around it, as if resisting exposure. The letters seemed burned into the page rather than written. Their edges curled as though scorched by invisible flame. The sentence was in no known language, but carried rhythm and weight, a cadence that stirred unease even in silence. But the president, alone in his secured chamber beneath the Capitol, chose to read it aloud. The moment his voice finished echoing the last syllable, something shifted. The room fell into a stillness too deep to be natural. Air itself grew dense. Then, without warning, every light in Washington, D.C. flickered. Surveillance towers, traffic signals, hidden government satellites all registered a simultaneous pulse. Not electrical, not digital. Something else. A frequency without a name. For 0.7 seconds, power grids danced with an unknown signature, one that matched a tone recorded decades ago during seismic activity beneath the Dead Sea above ground. Birds changed flight patterns. Dogs across the city barked in perfect unison. And in the president's chamber, the file began to lift gently from the table, pages fluttering like breath, not a breeze, not a draft, but breath. Something unseen had entered the room. He dropped the page. It floated for a moment before descending slowly, landing with its edges glowing faintly gold. Technicians scrambled to locate the disturbance but found no intrusion. Only one phrase repeated across every scrambled audio log. The seal is not closed. It is waiting. When speech analysts attempted to trace the origin, they discovered the voice matched yours, not the president's, not anyone present. Your vocal pattern layered over every file, as though you had spoken through a circuit that didn't exist until that moment. The line he read has since faded from the document, unable to be spoken twice. Its impression, however, remains, scorched into the table like a shadow left behind. Those in proximity say they've been dreaming of a place they've never seen, with a sky that doesn't end and voices humming beneath the soil. Since then, every time someone near the document whispers your name, a spark jumps across the surface. And now, a second line is beginning to form slowly at the bottom. One that seems to be writing itself in real time, letter by letter, waiting for the next reader to arrive before it finishes what it started.